May my life testify your goodness. May my eyes be watching for your movement. May my life testify your goodness. May my eyes be watching for your movement. Jesus, let me love like you do, Jesus. Let me give like you do, Jesus. Uproot my selfishness to sow in your service, Jesus. Let me love like you do, Jesus. Let me give like you do, Jesus. Uproot my selfishness to sow in your service. Such an awesome God, so mighty, so holy, so wonderful. Such an awesome God, so selfless, so generous, so faithful. You are faithful to me.
The Lord is my shepherd.
I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures.
He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul.
He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake.
Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death,
I will fear no evil.
For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me.
You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies.
You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Thanks, kids. It's great hearing your voices reading this 3,000-year-old 23rd Psalm, a poem where King David, who had once been a shepherd, says, "The Lord is my shepherd." Yahweh, the God of Israel, whose very name means I exist, I cause. I'm the God who makes it happen. He says, this God is my shepherd. It's cool because David had chosen Yahweh to be his shepherd. Or maybe I should say Yahweh had chosen David to be his sheep. A man who by the time he wrote the song was the king of Israel, the most powerful man in the nation. But as a boy, his kingdom was a herd of sheep. And as a shepherd boy out in those lonely fields, David learned a lot about life, about leadership, and about the Lord. He learned about God from being a shepherd. Later, the shepherd boy will become the shepherd king, a king who also wanted a leader. So he says, that's the Lord. He's my shepherd. Now, as simple as that sounds, there's no need for us to go further into the psalm without asking ourselves, are we going to apply this personally, or are we just going to read a poem today? The question would be, am I going to be willing to allow the Lord to be my shepherd, to lead me where he wants me to go instead of where I thought I was going, to provide for me what he thinks I need instead of what I think I need? Yet King David, the best king Israel ever had, came to the conclusion that he was at his best when he saw himself as a sheep needing to be led. Yahweh, David sings, is my shepherd, my protector, my provider, my leader. What a wise man to have recognized that the illusion of being in charge, the illusion of control, is exactly that. It's a fantasy. pursued by people who still think they're in control. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. I will lack nothing that I truly need. If I truly need it, God will provide it. What a profound thought. Let's say it aloud. If I truly need it, God will provide it. Now already I hear myself as a younger man arguing with that statement, arguing with King David's thought. It sounds too good to be true, and I have evidence that points to the contrary. I know of situations in my life and others where God didn't provide what I'm 99% sure they needed. They were left wanting. So how can David say, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want? Well, I don't know. Let's ask him. When I study the life of David, I see how he is the perfect author of this phrase, I'm not going to want. Not because of all the times when God made his life easy or gave him what he wanted. It was actually when God made life difficult that I think David learned this. Remember his childhood. David was raised by a father who didn't believe in him. He didn't seem to think his son would amount to much. When Samuel came to anoint one of Jesse's sons as king, he didn't even bother to call David in from the field. He was sure it wouldn't be him. You know, his brothers felt the same way. David wanted for a better family, and he never got that wish. But God was able to provide anyway, just differently than David wished for. He was anointed king in spite of his family. But then he's anointed king, but then he doesn't become king for a long time. He endured many years of being deprived of his rightful throne. I doubt he wanted that, but God allowed it. David was forced to flee from a jealously insane King Saul through barren countryside, always looking in the rearview mirror, drinking stagnant water, sleeping on the ground, missing all the comforts and companionship of home. Hardly the life of a crowned prince. He endured years of acute hardship. Even later, his life as a king was filled with personal pain. One son died in infancy, another one rebelled and died in that rebellion. He buried them both. No, this is David saying, if the Lord is my shepherd, I refuse to want. Now, this is obviously more than him saying, because God is my shepherd, I get everything I want. That's not what he's saying here. No, it's more like, I'm going to decide to allow God to decide if I need it. And if I need it, God will provide it. So if he hasn't provided it, then I must not need it yet. Okay, friends, I'm going to speak from my experience now. If we could latch onto this thought and live like we believed it, this one thought could simplify our behavior and increase our contentment overnight. If we could let go of the plan and let God decide, we would truly live as if we wanted for nothing. Even though we still want things that we don't have, we would say, I'm not in charge of that. Now, let's be clear. There's other scriptures that where even Jesus says, ask, seek, knock, pursue, work hard. But when it becomes clear to you that God is simply not providing what you've been asking for, at some point you have a decision to make to let go and let God be your shepherd. Choose to be his lamb. Now, the younger you fought that. You kept reaching for what God was providing. You felt discontent in those days. You hadn't learned yet that contentment doesn't come from getting everything you want. Contentment is just a choice. Finding satisfaction with what God has provided already. Deciding, I shall not want. I simply refuse to be dissatisfied with God's provision. You know, the great Apostle Paul was one of the most impatient people in his pre-Christian days. Even after he followed the Lord, every now and then you could see a flare of impatience in him. But by the time he wrote his letter to the Philippians, he said it like this, I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it's like to be in need. I know what it's like to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. Jesus talked like this also, about a daily dependence on God, a choice we make that simplifies our lives. Do not worry, Christ said, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? Your heavenly Father knows that you need them. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Well, the sooner we allow ourselves to be God's sheep, the sooner we can be satisfied in the presence of our shepherd. The more we trust him to decide what to provide and when, the less we worry about the unknown future. All right, read on. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Now stop and think there, and I think you would know this. For a sheep to lay down in the middle of a field would mean a couple of things. First of all, they've eaten their fill. They're in a green pasture. Second of all, they feel safe out there. There's nothing for them to worry about. The shepherd must be nearby, and he's encouraging them to rest. David in this psalm reminds us that each day, each week, has to have a rhythm that includes rest. So I say this, let the Good Shepherd make you rest a bit each day, and then each week, take a full Sabbath. Reestablish your rhythm of rest. All right, good. Keep reading. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. It's an out loud, private conversation with God where we are telling God how we feel. And you know, when we have a conversation with God, he can restore our soul, because as we say things, we almost are kind of our own therapist. We hear ourselves crying out to God for what we need, and he wants to give us what we need. For some of you, in order for God to restore your soul, you would have to allow him to restore your relationship with him. Jesus spoke of a good shepherd who was willing to leave 99 sheep in order to seek and find one straying sheep. Maybe that's you today. Why not let Jesus find you there and spend the next few days letting him restore your soul? All right, let's keep reading. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Wow, this phrase is loaded with meaning. The picture is one of the shepherd selecting the best path from a few options. That there are other paths the sheep might wander down that are not the best ones. A good shepherd moves the flock down the very best paths, the paths that lead to the best destination. Maybe it's an old path towards a well-loved pasture. Maybe it's a new path towards something new. If sheep are left to themselves, they usually stick with the familiar spot, gnawing the grass down to the roots, drinking from the same hole. Even if a mile away, the water is much cleaner. Sheep just like the routine. But familiar paths aren't always his path for us. You know, I remember years ago beating my head against a wall, literally for several years, on involving my ministry career. I decided there were certain things that I would and wouldn't do in ministry. I was looking for a familiar path, just one away from my current job. I kind of wanted the same thing in a healthier environment. And to be honest, planting a church and then leading it through all the challenges was really not on my to-do list. But that was exactly the path that God had for me. He was going to lead me down. And it wasn't until I allowed him to lead me in that righteous path the Cornerstone was born. I think some of you are in a similar situation. At the beginning of this year, you had set your course. But now you sense that God is changing the plan. There's a new path right in front of you, the right path. Now, maybe when David talks about paths of righteousness, he's talking about the person that where their old paths actually led them toward unhealthy habits. And God is calling you now to lead you away from those things and toward righteousness. You know, David could testify that his life's greatest regrets came after going down the wrong path. Later, after God's grace had covered David's greatest sin, he encouraged us to let God be the shepherd who chooses our direction. Let God take us toward what we need and away from what could hurt us or others. One more thought. Look once more at the phrase in the poem, "He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake." Focus on those final 4 words. Remember how David's family, the house of Jesse, never saw it coming that the baby of the family would ever accomplish much? That he would be the king of Israel? Well, I think some of you can relate. You've been on your own for a long time, where your family could have encouraged you. You got none of that. Well, all the more reason then to let the Lord be your shepherd and let us be your flock, because we would love to support whatever you feel God is pushing you to accomplish for his name's sake. Maybe what you will become is far beyond your biological family name. Maybe your new name as an adopted child of a wonderful father can give you a new name. And what you will be for his name's sake. I love that. All right, read on. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Even if the path he has taken me on, even though the path that he has allowed feels dark, he's right there. He's with us. We can be assured that if he has allowed us to walk in this scary valley, that he is right there with us, closer than ever before. "I'll fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Okay, let's talk about this, the shepherd's 2 most important tools. And I have had the opportunity to observe shepherds at work, both in the United States, in Kenya, and in the Middle East. Their methods vary, but all of them carry some type of rod or staff, and usually both. Now, the rod is always a thick stick, maybe a couple feet long, with a knob on one end. The Maasai in Eastern Africa can accurately throw it end over end to peg a wild dog harassing the sheep. I've seen shepherds in Israel use their rod to examine the wool of the sheep, parting it to look for skin problems or bugs. Now, the staff is different. It's a longer, thinner stick that usually has a crook in one end. The shepherd can gently hook a lamb caught in a thicket and pull it up and out. The staff gently prods a ewe to keep up with the flock. Some breeds of sheep are prone to reject their own newborn baby if they smell too much like a human. So these shepherds can be seen moving that baby lamb toward the mother using the crook of their staff and never touching the newborn. On any given day, sheep needing a little affection can be reassured with some scratches from the shepherd's rod or staff. Like David says, "Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Now, the more that we reflect on his rod and his staff, held in his capable and powerful hands, the sooner our fear dissipates and the more that we are comforted. I'd like some of us to sit with that for a while. We've got to move on. We're going to run out of time. "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." And this is the phrase that has long puzzled readers, because it seems that in this one verse, David deviates from the sheep and shepherd metaphor to one of a host preparing a meal with enemies lurking nearby. So it helps to know that the Hebrew word table is what a shepherd would also call a mesa, a high plateau. The mesa or table that David refers to is the high country where the shepherd leads the sheep in the summer as temperatures in the valley rise and the grass browns. This is when the shepherd treks up into the hills in the spring to prepare the summer pasture. He walks the mesa before the sheep arrive in order to get it ready, clearing out all the poisonous weeds, finding the best water, and scouting out any nearby predators. When the table is set, when the table is prepared, the shepherd leads the sheep there to graze. He has to stay on guard the whole time against high country coyotes and mountain lions, hungry after a long winter. But the shepherd is perfectly able to feed those sheep even with enemies nearby. Like how God can take care of us without clearing out all our problems first. He can care for you even if life presents very real challenges that we do refer to as enemies. And you know what? He is there to care for us in this new place where enemies abound. Read on, you anoint my head with oil, David says. Like the shepherd anoints the sheep's head, because summer is the season for biting flies that are out in force attacking the sheep's head. These flies are relentless as they feast on the sheep's blood and attempt to plant their eggs inside the sheep's ears and nose. It's pure torture. Until the shepherd takes out a flask filled with warm olive oil mixed with tar and sulfur, rubbing it on each of the ewes' heads to repel those flies. David, who had anointed his father's sheep every summer for many years in the lonely high country, wrote, I'm your sheep, God, and you anoint my head with oil. You keep away an enemy attempting to plant thoughts in my head. You know, I also think that when David reflects on his head being anointed, he would be remembering the day the prophet Samuel visited his father's house in Bethlehem with oil to anoint David as Israel's next king. My cup overflows, David writes, as he counts his blessings. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Do you see how he's not pursuing those things? He's just following the shepherd, and then those things are just following him. Like Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then everything will fall into place. So with this psalm, the most popular of all the psalms, King David celebrates Israel's God, Yahweh, as his shepherd. You know, Micah predicted a coming shepherd to be born in Bethlehem. Listen to a few words of the prophecy where Micah predicted that Christ would come. Micah 5, verse 2, But you, O Bethlehem, are only a small village among all the people of Judah. Yet a ruler of Israel, whose origins are in distant past, will come from you on my behalf. And he will stand to shepherd his flock with the Lord's strength in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. Well, Micah was talking about Jesus, and later Christ accepted that mantle, saying, that's true. I am the good shepherd that lays down his life for the sheep. And I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Do you know him? Because if you do, just like David, the Lord is your shepherd too. At least he wants to be. He wants to provide every need. He wants to lead us down righteous paths toward green pastures and still water where we can be satisfied and then rest. He wants to prepare a table for us, even if enemies are nearby. He wants to walk with us through any dark valley. He wants to comfort us as he protects us so that goodness and mercy will follow us all the days of our lives. So, let the Lord be your shepherd this week. Let him be your leader, your protector, your provider, your path chooser. If there's a flock, large or small, depending on you to lead them, then lead them well. Follow Christ's example to do what he said to Simon Peter that day by the lake. If you love me, Christ said, then care for my sheep. Well, I think I'll wrap it up there and say a blessing over you. I love you, I miss you, and I want you to be well. And I say this, may the Lord bless you and keep you, the great shepherd of the sheep. May you rest in his presence. May you feast at his table, even in the presence of your enemies. May you find your satisfaction in him and your contentment in what he has provided. You shall not want. All right, sit still for a couple more minutes because I want you to hear a beautiful song that our worship leaders wrote for today. God bless you. Love you.
The Lord is, he is my shepherd. I want for nothing. God, all that I need. care